Welcome to quarantine day 28. As you can see, I've just gotten back from work myself. Let me clean up. Much better. I'm drowning in homework for my master's program. I haven't given myself a day off since January 15th, and I just finished watching Contagion. Tired of talking about viruses yet? Too bad! Contagion has skyrocketed to the top of people's watch lists, and according to its distributor, Warner Brothers, it shot up from 270th place last December to being the most requested, behind only the Harry Potter films. It's got people clamoring for it from Netflix to the Pirate Bay. So why aren't people tired of talking about viruses and pandemics? You'd think with the news orbiting around it all the time and our lives basically changed because of it, we want to get away from it in our media. You'd think so, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So, is there something special about Contagion, or is it just another viral hit? Huh? Let's get started. Contagion was released in 2011, and it was directed by Steven Soderbergh. He's best remembered for his 2001 Ocean's 11 remake, which seems to be pretty well remembered. That's probably where he got all of his practice handling those celebrities. Let's look at Ocean's 11. He had George Clooney, Bernie Mac, Brad Pitt, Don Cheadle, Julia Roberts, and Matt Damon. For Contagion, it was Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, Lawrence Fishburne, Kate Winslet, Bryan Cranston, and Matt Damon. 2 for 2. So what are all these people doing? Strap in. That's kind of a lot. Jesus Christ, cut that out! We start the film off with Paltrow as Beth Emhoff, just about to come home not only from cheating on her husband, but from China, bearing a virus. Partially from a bat. Could these guys see into the future? What is this? Beth collapses into seizures, dies, and the son that she hugged 3 hours ago dies back home while Matt Damon berates the doctor. What else is going on with the 5 other characters that we're going to follow? I thought you'd never ask. Fishburne as Dr. Cheever gets briefed on a virus spreading like crazy in Minnesota, and sends in Dr. Mears, played by Winslet, to start establishing treatment procedures. But, because the disease is so contagious, Mears eventually finds herself sick with the virus, which they dub MEV1. Doctors Ali Hextall and Ian Sussman, played by Jennifer L. and Elliot Gould respectively, go back and forth about what they need to do to make a vaccine. Now that's the most escapist part of this entire thing. In the real world, we're not going to have a real vaccine ready for another 18 months. Even Mr. Orange Idiot knows that.
I've heard very quick numbers, a matter of months, and I've heard pretty much a year would be an outside number.
A vaccine that you make and start testing in a year is not a vaccine that's deployable. So he's asking the question, when is it going to be deployable? And that is going to be at the earliest a year to a year and a half, no matter how fast you go.
Hextall jams herself in the thigh, and then a few months later they start raffling off tickets for vaccines. Bro, put me in there. Unfortunately, the news and the people who follow it hit just a little too close to home in Contagion. As the local news starts to pick up on what's happening, an internet conspiracy blogger played by Jude Law learns about the virus and assumes the worst case scenario.
Alan, we have almost no freelance budget anymore, and after
you
each one
wait
end up...
a few days, this will be tweeted and
We don't want to be
YouTube
the paper that
all
cries
over the
wolf.
planet.
This time, he turns out to be right. The blogger starts selling what amounts to an essential oil as treatment to people desperate to keep themselves and their families safe. Don't be getting any ideas! That's the last thing we need right now. One thing that literal scientists talk about with regards to Contagion is how realistic it is. Several actors, including Cotillard, Fishburne, and Winslet, even spent time with scientists and researchers as part of preparations for their roles. The lengths that Soderbergh and his cast went to actually get everything right should be commended and actually talked about. Actually, they got help from Larry Brilliant, the guy who helped cure smallpox, the WHO itself, and a number of the actors were actually invested in figuring out how this stuff works. They even took cues from how the 2009 flu epidemic was handled, which is why the movie is more about a failure of systems than the failure of individuals. Professionals have been saying for years that it was only a matter of when for a pandemic like ours, or for contagions for that matter. Soderbergh and his team's interpretation, as we've seen, hits really close to the reality that we're going through. Just look at some of these clips. It's chilling how close it is to our world right now. We follow Mears as she tracks down contagious individuals, communicates with Cheever, and wrangles the people around her into getting the community prepared to tackle the problem. And what exactly does she get in return for this? She not only gets sick with MEV1, but also gets denied an escape from a dangerous situation so that a random politician can travel quicker.
There's a sick congressman from Illinois in D.C. They're using the pod to fly him home, then they're closing down Midway and O'Hare.
A woman who's put her life on the line to save people is left to literally die. Her last act that we see is her trying to hand her jacket to a fellow patient left racked with chills by his fever. Mears dies in obscurity and buried in a mass grave. Not a good ending. And while a vaccine is developed in what you and I in the real world would consider record time, there are still mass graves and 26 million fictional worldwide deaths. And I'd like to agree with something that Zach Kornfeld of the Try Guys said recently.
But the administration is now estimating that 100,000 to 240,000 Americans might die if we do this right. And they are calling that a success story. That is not a success. That is a tragedy in slow motion.
The point that we've reached by now, April 11th, is something that I would call a bad end to. Let's take a break and talk about Soderbergh's direction for a second. He's known as a director who likes to experiment and go outside of the contemporary norms of Hollywood, but he's also known as a director that follows the French New Wave film movement. That means my favorite thing, he takes apart power structures. The best example of this is with the World Health Organization investigator. She works in China to figure out where the virus came from, and gets kidnapped as leverage for a vaccine when it's created.
You stay here with us until they find a cure. You're gonna get us to the front of the line.
And they're right. Her life is more valuable than the whole village that she's come to care for. And when she's told that the medicine that they traded her for was a placebo, her first action is to run back and warn them. Power does and will determine who gets the vaccine first. Power does and will determine who gets to hear the extent of the bad news first, and who gets to do something about it. Just throw in a billionaire sheltering and whining in their own mansions and you basically have 2020 in a nutshell. That general sense of tension and unease is actually deliberately put there by the sound design. Soderbergh and his composer Cliff Martinez pulled from electronic and orchestral elements to get the sound right. Now listen to how the sound design works for the film when it comes to transitions. For the most part, it's nice and seamless. Soderbergh has worked with big casts in the past, but honestly, I get like a disaster movie vibe from Contagion. This style reminds me of 2012, where we followed around a bunch of people to see what would happen to them, but in a way, it's more involving and personal. When a tsunami is about to engulf a city, there's nothing people can do to stop it. The best you can hope for is to get yourself and your family out of the way. A pandemic like ours or Contagion's is a disaster, but it's something that can actually be stopped. But it can only be stopped by enough people doing the right thing. And that's probably why this movie is hitting so hard with audiences right now. Every day we wake up and see medical professionals and some authorities trying to do the right thing, and others just aren't. Stay home, stay safe. One more thing, you're probably wondering if this review was shot on a phone. Well, I only have one answer for that. If it's good enough for Steven Soderbergh, it's good enough for me. Oh, there's so much more I wish I could have talked about here. I could have probably related it to whether or not art is supposed to help a populace or lull it into a consumptive state, but there's not always time for hard left theory. Maybe next time. Oh, I also didn't even talk about Folding Ideas video. I liked it a lot, and I don't necessarily agree with the fact that defending a film because of its content's nature does it any good, but agree to disagree. Can someone get that guy some soup? He sounds like he could use a warm bowl of something, I don't know. But yeah, stay home, stay safe. I'm going to keep arguing with my boss about the fact that the virus isn't a Chinese hoax or a biological weapon. Wish me luck, I guess. Until next time, thanks for watching. Remember, we're only 9 meals away from anarchy.